the easiest part of the book, right? Why is India obsessed by your sexuality? Easy.
Well, that's for some reason, as I said, the word conjecture is a word I use very often on my talk show. Well, that is because when people don't have final answers, they tend to kind of, browse around the topic always. And so have I. And but in the book, I've said what I've felt the need to, and I've said it in a way that I felt I needed to express it. And there's really nothing more to say. So I think that every answer anyone's looking for is in the book.
You know, there are several moments in that book where you talk about people confronting you at airports, at parties, and saying the most gross things, the most insensitive things, and you come back to them is sassy, but also a little sad. Why should anyone have to explain any aspect of their lives at all, or defend it?
I think people sometimes, when you're in the celebrity zone, I think people tend to sometimes just not know what to say. Like, I feel like when they encounter you, they either tend to overcompensate and say exceptionally polite things, or they'll say the most inappropriate things to you. I think anyone who's been in the celebrity space will tell you that you'll have people come and say the most overfamiliar things to you at times. And sometimes because they think that they own you, because you're in their living room on a daily basis, perhaps because of my television exposure, or the fact that one is around and all over the place, they feel they have an ownership over you. And sometimes that allows them to kind of cross the boundary of decency. And they'll say things that are inappropriate. And you'll have to stand there. Sometimes you can give a response back, which sometimes goes over their head, because it's not a straight-lined answer. And sometimes you use sarcasm, which also sometimes doesn't get a response. Sometimes all you do is just, like Shah Rukh told me the other day, that now when people say things, he just nods. Because there's nothing else to say. Sometimes you just nod because people say the most bizarre things, and sometimes it's members of the fraternity, sometimes it's members of the media within the fraternity, sometimes it's random strangers at an airport, and you have to just deal with it. There's nothing you can do. You can't. At least I'm not the guy who's going to start getting into a fight, because I don't think I'll have the ability to handle it if I was at the receiving end. So I just let it pass.
May I share that one moment at the airport, which is in your book, so everyone's going to read it anyway,
right,
where a person comes up to you, his wife is with him, and he walks up to you and says to you, "So, are you a homo?"
Yeah.
And your response is, "Why? Are you interested?" And I thought that was just fabulous. That's, the aplomb and the tight slap that probably the man warranted.
Well, it was it was what came out, literally it just came out very, because I thought it was an exceptionally inappropriate thing. And the wife was clicking a photograph of mine while he was asking me this question. And he asked me, patting me on my back. It wasn't just a car. It was an overfamiliar pat. As if I had, we had dinner last night, and he decided to ask me this question early in the morning. And it's happened to me. It's also in the book when I was on the launch of a channel, and it was an early morning breakfast interview where I was asked an inappropriate question, and I was completely shocked that we were on national television. Of course, it never made it because they realized that it was completely wrong. Fortunately, it wasn't a live telecast. But sometimes you just wonder whether people just don't have the sensitivity or the decency, or to sometimes use language to ask a question that may not come across inappropriate. There are various ways. I'm a member of the media myself. I host a talk show. And I know sometimes when you want to kind of ask something, you can circumvent it with words and vocabulary. You don't suddenly just go out there and ask in the pretense of being completely candid, or then irreverent, or perhaps overfamiliar.
But the surprising part of the book, towards the end of the book, when you talk about maybe going on to dating sites, I found that fascinating, that you went on to an elite dating site and a date was set up for you in Tokyo. And you said, why should I go to Tokyo to meet someone? How did you get onto these dating sites?
That's
why?
a story in itself.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to kind of scratch the surface to find, what's not immediately available. So there are various ways and means I think people sometimes have to kind of look at. When you're single and 44, you'll probably go through every kind of possible available opportunity.
I thought that was fantastic because most people would not admit it.
I would have actually liked to give the
admit it, but they
name.
won't.
It was a selective. I would have liked to give them the name, but they are so exclusive and quiet and have full, like, disclosure issues. So that's why I didn't give that information. Not that anything's come out of it, and I'm not a success story of their agency at all. In fact, I'm a rather, apparently 2 out of 3 people succeed, and I'm that one who failed.
You also talked about 3.5 failed relationships. 1 true love and I think 3.5 failed relationships. You've spoken about it with a great deal of some amount of regret but compassion, empathy about why they didn't work out.
Well, they were not any relationships. They were mostly unrequited love situations, which is great fodder for a filmmaker, not so great for a personal life. Yeah, I mean, I suppose that comes from your sense of indulgence and over-expectation. Sometimes you tend to expect from quarters that won't deliver, and that invariably happens when, and that's what I call indulgence. Is like if I had a pragmatic approach to love, which is not possible with me, I would possibly have been in a long-standing relationship. But I've always desired what I know I can't have.
You also talked about divorce being the new marriage. And throughout the book, there is a kind of a strand which keeps going back to infidelity. And it's like almost a semi-obsessive aspect of your creative process to deconstruct everybody's marriages and to see who's cheating, who's lying, who's living a lie.
Because truly, in my experience, I think there's much ado about fidelity and infidelity. I think sometimes true emotion and relationships can go beyond those. And being a single bystander, you tend to be so close to so many relationships and marriages. And in my experience, and I say this, and I don't have any kind of, with all kinds of moral policing on my statement, I'm sure, but I don't think infidelity is a deal breaker. I don't believe
it's not a deal breaker.
No, I don't think so. And I feel like it's very individualistic. It's as per each one's life. And I feel like I'm not judgmental about it at all. And I'm not sure if I'm capable of complete fidelity, even if I was deeply in love.
But in your film, when you're talking about the process where you were going to shoot the scene, very interesting conversation that you had with Shah Rukh, when all of you had second thoughts whether to go all the way and show Rani and him in bed or suggest that they've actually had sex, where you were advised against it, and even Shah Rukh was not sure whether it should have that scene or it should be like the Meryl Streep scene where it ends without them actually doing it.
I was in a zone of abandon at that time. I was like, I felt I had wings. I wanted to fly as a filmmaker. But when I look back, I feel like I remember very clearly, and I've said it, that when the scene was going on, I was watching it at a preview, and there was a very traditional couple watching it. And the moment Shah Rukh and Rani check into the hotel in Kabhi Alvida, the lady turned to her husband and he said, "Don't worry, dream sequence hai." And because they imagined that this is not possible. In a Karan Johar film, it's not possible that this would actually transpire. At the moment they realized it was not a dream sequence, 5 minutes later they were out of their cinema halls. So I've realized that, sometimes topics like this are brushed under the carpet in our society. We don't like to watch what is startling and truthful on celluloid. We like to watch virtue and morality, say the right messaging. The moment you make viewing uncomfortable, the moment you say things that hit you hard, those are the films that bother you the most, and you have extreme reactions. Kabhi Alvida had extreme reactions. I had people come and say, I hated it. The only reason you can hate it if it's the truth of your home. And it's the truth of your marriage. You can't hate that film otherwise. Or had people say, it's uncomfortable to see this film with my spouse. Because what do you say after? Oh, I loved the film. What did you love about it? Or if I hated it, then why did you hate it so much? So it's basically, it was more a commentary. So the film did so much, and someone told me that it did so much better in the West because there's a culture of watching film alone. So there are men who went alone and women who went alone. But in India, we go as a couple or as a family, and it's an uncomfortable watch sometimes.